Going back to 6-year-old you, I like to set a foundation. What were the books that spoke to you two as little girls?
I remember it because my kids came home with it recently, well, in the last many years, but the Stregonona. Remember the pasta that just made you want to eat bolognese for days? Stregonona was a big one for me that I loved. All the Berenstain Bears were such big ones.
I was obsessed with The Giving Tree. I mean, you can't go wrong with The Giving Tree. Angelina Ballerina, that was another one. You know, in my mind, I was like, yeah, these mice, that's what their lives are like.
Sure. That's how all mice live.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that or Ratatouille.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you're setting out to entertain small people, it's a tall order because you have to put yourself back in their bodies. And so how did you guys decide to do a picture book together? What was the catalyst for that?
Well, it all started back in the 2018 Pasquale Christmas festivities.
What usually goes down at those things?
Well,
A lot.
so many things, but lots of joy. And Maris and I were off in a corner having a conversation, and the Eliza Hamilton picture book had just come out, and I did an afterword for that. And we were talking about children's books and children's literature, and Maris had shared that she had written some board books of her own that she was, working on, and I was like, oh, it'd be so fun to write a children's book. Let's write one together. Yeah. And that's really where it started. And then we met at, we were just talking about today, we met at N Bistro downtown, and we had like a journaling writing session over like lychee martinis.
Which is how all good children's books start.
But mostly just to ask ourselves, what is going on in the world right now?
Yeah.
Which was a lot. What do we care about? What do we want to impart to young people? And I think for myself, coming off of Hamilton, the biggest shock was how many young people connected with it. I mean, I knew it was cool. I knew that the musical theater crowd would love it. But for instance, your son, Gus, was like
6.
as tall as this table. He was so small, and he was dressed as George Washington.
Knew every word. I mean, it was astonishing for me as a parent to see what your kids are drawn to on their own. Naturally, right. And that's right about the age. This age of like Piper Chen is right about the age that kids really kind of start separating from their parents and picking the things that they like. And so to have my son fall in love with you was fantastic. Like you feel like you've really accomplished something. Maris, in your experience in child development, what was the story for you? Why did you want to write a book?
Mine came less from being a psychotherapist and more from being a mother. Yeah. I had my 2 boys who are here tonight.
Hi,
I'm so
boys.
happy to see them.
What's up, dudes?
And we were really inundated in picture book world. And to be a parent, as any grown-up, many of us have been, but to be the parent that a child crawls into your lap and you share that very, very special moment of reading to them a book that in this picture book world, typically they can't read on their own yet. And they're connecting it really through your voice, through how you're putting emphasis on it, really what your kind of spin is. And the books that we kept reaching for over and over again and how special that time was. I've said it a million times, reading to them is my favorite part of the day. And it still is. Now they're just, much, much bigger books, or maybe they're reading along and things like that. But to have had that experience, and this was, during that time, that was really what was going on. I was reading to them and felt like I'd love to be a part of that. I'd love to be something that's actually more creating a piece of it. So when Phillipa said, well, let's do it together, and also, by the way, if Phillipa Soo asks you to collaborate,
yeah, you do
collaborate, right? You jump on board, and it was incredible, and it was a beautiful, amazing collaboration. But the beginning for me really just came from wanting to write something for those 2 gentlemen.
I know sometimes when you're performing, sometimes the role can start to infiltrate your personality, and I've had that happen to me. When you were portraying Eliza, and the show ends with Eliza opening up this orphanage and becoming like a protector of children and really an advocate, how much did that affect the work that you wanted to get involved in?
It changed my life completely because I had a very clarifying moment where I realized that my interest in art making involved activism. And community outreach, the ability to play her opened a world of possibilities to reaching out to a community of Graham Wyndham folks that I wouldn't have been connected to otherwise. So definitely, you know, she was such a role model in her own right, but for me to get to step into her shoes, I felt like it was my duty to go deeper and not only know things about her life, but to experience the things that she was experiencing as a woman in the city, engaging with people, engaging with young people, and writing a children's book was definitely aligned with that.
How cool to add to that legacy hundreds of years later and be here in the city.
Oh my gosh,
doing
she has no idea that we're talking about her so much.
Yeah, conjuring it. It's so cool. No, I joked with Maris backstage that I come from a place where people don't go to therapy. You know, like I did not come from a family that talked about mental health or feelings or anything like that. And so my journey in motherhood was figuring out how to break certain cycles and how to speak to my kids and get down on their level and honor their feelings, which is really a core theme in this book. And it felt validating as a mother to have this book back up all the stuff I've been telling my daughter. Like, being mad's a choice, babe. You could also make other choices. I've always looked at children's books as therapy for the kids that don't necessarily have access to it. And so what were the conversations you guys had about making this accessible to the kid that's out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, the pitch was the start, which was Piper is kind of like my avatar.
Yeah.
She's inspired by me, but she's her own little girl, a real little girl living in the world who has really big feelings and is trying to navigate through the world in some way. And we, at the time, you know, this was 2021, we were very adamant that we wanted to highlight an Asian voice, an Asian character, and that felt very right and very true to us. Necessary. And then once we went on the ride, you know, Nai came into the picture, her heritage came into the picture, and then we were sort of thinking about this idea that was inspired by something that actually happened to me. Like, I had horrible stage fright as a kid. I refused to go out for one of my ballet recitals, you know, so frightened. And so cute. We ran with that idea, and it was really interesting because, like, we wanted to create a story that was you know, entertaining and beautiful and joyful, but also we were like, well, like, what are we imparting to these young minds who this might be the first book that they ever hear? This might be the first story that they ever hear. So what do we want to say with that? And I think when I was younger, you know, the idea was, okay, well, you're feeling anxious or nervous about something, just push through.
Yeah,
you know,
suck
push
it up.
through. And there is value in that in some way, but if I had a tool that allowed me to have access to the feelings that I was feeling, I probably would have chosen to push through anyway, instead of living in agony and, you know, being at my piano recital being like, I'm so nervous, you know, and it was really delicate, those conversations we had, and especially with Maris being a psychotherapist and being a mother, the language surrounding how you talk to a young person was so valuable in terms of her input.
Yeah, we were very intentional with our language, and you know, I don't work with children directly, so I work with adults, and I joke, but most of the work we're doing is
So you see the
talking
after
about
effects.
your childhood,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
right? We're looking at your childhood. Most of the lessons we're talking about in this book, which aren't particularly overt. She's also this like very sweet, fun, like singing
It's
through
such
the
a
world,
light book.
light character,
Yeah.
exactly. So hopefully it's kind of a little, you know, sugar with your medicine kind of a bit. But it's the same stuff that we're talking to so many adults about that two emotions that may seem to conflict, that you can hold both at the same time, and both are totally valid in you, and to recognize that, and to be still for a moment, to acknowledge both of those feelings, and to live with intention, right? Piper gets the choice of what she wants to do, and to be intentional about how you want to move forward in your life and what those feelings mean, where they show up in our bodies, and what they're really telling us about who we are and how we want to move forward. And that was very intentional in terms of that language. And, you know, Pippa's raising the point also about Nanai and that character, and that too, because the process for us was such a joy to be more curious about each other. I mean, we're sisters-in-law, but to really be curious more about our own backgrounds and our own ethnicities and culture, and knowing that that changes, and especially here in the States, where the level of acculturation can be so different based on generation. That was something that was really important to us to highlight as well, especially at that time with having this Chinese American protagonist.